The most dangerous man in Marseille was seconds from his engagement party when he saw her, his ex, crossing the street with twins strapped to her chest. Twins that looked exactly 4 months old. Exactly 18 months after he'd vanished from her life. His hand started shaking. The woman beside him in diamonds noticed. And those babies? They had his eyes. Lucien Moreau adjusted his platinum cufflinks as the white Mercedes Maybach S-Class cut through the amber-lit streets of downtown Marseille. Behind him, 2 black SUVs followed at precise intervals, his security detail, shadows that had followed him since he inherited an empire built on blood and silence. The Mediterranean evening wrapped the city in warmth, but inside the climate-controlled interior, everything was cold calculation. Samantha Helton sat beside him, 31 years of aristocratic breeding wrapped in ivory silk. Her blonde hair was styled in a flawless chignon, and a diamond tennis bracelet, worth more than most people earned in a year, caught the passing streetlights with every elegant gesture. She was exactly what his world required, connected, polished, untouchable. At 38, Lucien had learned that power wasn't about passion. It was about positioning. His engagement to Samantha was 4 months old enough to silence the whispers, new enough that he could still pretend the wedding date remained flexible. There was no love between them. No heat. No vulnerability. Just an arrangement that would unite 2 empires and make both families wealthier than God. Your father says the merger will extend our reach into the Eastern markets, Samantha said, checking her lipstick in a compact mirror. Our engagement party will set the tone. Everyone who matters will be watching. Lucien said nothing. His dark eyes remained fixed on the road ahead, his jaw set in that expression his enemies had learned to fear. His mind was already calculating tomorrow's negotiations when the traffic light ahead turned red. The crosswalk filled with ordinary people living ordinary lives, completely unaware that the man watching them from behind bulletproof glass had dismantled entire organizations with nothing but a phone call and patience. Lucien observed them absently, detached, when something made his heart stop. A woman was crossing the street. She moved slowly, deliberately, a double baby carrier strapped to her chest. 2 infants bundled in soft knitted caps, one blue, one pink, stared out at the world with wide, solemn eyes. Her auburn hair was pulled into a disheveled ponytail. Dark shadows bruised the skin beneath her eyes. A faded jacket hung loose on her frame, too thin for the evening chill. She looked exhausted. She looked like she had been fighting a war no one else could see. Even from a distance, even with her head bowed, even after 18 months of forcing himself to forget, Lucien knew her. The delicate line of her jaw. The way she shifted her weight to compensate for the babies. The quiet resilience in every careful step. Loretta Jensen. His former lover. The woman he had walked away from exactly 1 year and 6 months ago. The babies looked about 4 months old. The timing would be exactly right. Lucien's hands that had never shaken while holding a gun, trembled against the armrest. The world outside seemed to slow, to fracture, as Loretta paused mid-crosswalk. One of the babies began to fuss. She adjusted the carrier with practiced tenderness, pressing a kiss to the tiny forehead, murmuring something soft that Lucien couldn't hear but felt in his chest. The baby quieted. She continued walking, disappearing into the crowd on the opposite sidewalk. Lucien. Samantha's voice sliced through the fog. The light's green. We're going to be late. He blinked. Cars behind them were waiting. His driver glanced back through the rearview mirror, confusion flickering across his trained expression. Lucien, you look like you've seen a ghost, Samantha said, studying his face with a blend of curiosity and irritation. Do you know that woman? Lucien forced his features back into stone. No one important. But his mind was a hurricane. Had Loretta been pregnant when he left her that night, the night he told her they were finished, that she didn't belong in his world, that loving him would only paint a target on her back? Had she been carrying his children when he walked out the door and ordered his men to block all contact? Or had she discovered it afterward, alone and abandoned, and chosen to survive without him? The questions multiplied, each one a blade twisting deeper. He had left her to protect her. He had convinced himself it was the only noble choice, that a woman like Loretta deserved safety, not a life spent fleeing enemies she never made. He had told himself that walking away was strength. But now, seeing her with those babies, exhausted, struggling, bruised, but still standing, Lucien realized something that shattered every justification he had built. She had given him children. She had given him a son and a daughter, and she had done it completely, utterly alone. While he sat in a bulletproof car beside a woman he didn't love, planning an engagement party that meant nothing, Loretta had been fighting to survive. Fighting to keep their children breathing. Fighting a war he should have been there to win beside her. And he hadn't even known she was bleeding. Lucien barely heard another word Samantha said for the rest of the drive. His mind replayed that crosswalk again and again, Loretta's exhausted face, the bruise on her cheek, the way she held those babies like they were the only thing in the world worth protecting. By the time they arrived at the engagement party, Lucien had already made a decision. He would find out the truth. He would find Loretta. And this time, he wouldn't walk away. But he had no idea how much 18 months had cost her. Or how much blood it would take to fix what he had broken. The grand ballroom of the Palais Méditerranée was designed to intimidate. 300 guests filled the space, politicians with blood on their hands, crime families dressed in Dior and lies, and photographers capturing what would be tomorrow's front page across half of Europe. Champagne flowed like water. Orchestra music swelled over carefully orchestrated conversations where deals were made and threats were whispered behind smiles. This was Lucien's world. He'd built it. Controlled it. Mastered it. Tonight, it felt like a prison. Samantha was radiant. She floated through the crowd in ivory silk, her laugh perfectly calibrated, her touch lingering just long enough on the arms of men who mattered. She posed for photographers with her hand on Lucien's chest, the diamond engagement ring catching every flash. She was everything this moment required, charming, beautiful, ruthless beneath the polish. Lucien stood beside her like a monument. His expression was carved stone. His responses were automatic. But his mind was 18 blocks away, locked on a crosswalk, replaying a scene that had shattered every certainty he'd built. Loretta. The twins. The bruise on her cheek. The exhaustion in her eyes. The timing would be exactly right. Lucien, they're waiting for your toast. Samantha's voice was honey over steel. She squeezed his arm just hard enough to hurt. Smile. We're building a legacy, remember? He lifted his champagne glass. Said words he didn't hear. The crowd applauded. Nothing felt real. The memory ambushed him during the second course. 18 months ago. Loretta's apartment. Late summer rain against the windows. Her standing in the doorway wearing his shirt, bare feet on hardwood, eyes wide and confused as he told her it was over. You don't belong in my world, Lucien had said, forcing his voice into ice. Loving me will get you killed. I won't watch that happen. Then let me make that choice. Her voice broke. Don't decide my life for me. I already have. He'd turned toward the door, unable to look at her face. This is mercy, Loretta. One day you'll understand. He'd walked out believing he was her savior. Her protector. The noble martyr sacrificing love for her survival. He'd been so certain he was right. "Sir." Marcus appeared at his shoulder like a shadow, phone in hand. They moved to the balcony, away from the cameras and careful ears. The Mediterranean stretched dark and endless below them. "Tell me," Lucien said. Marcus glanced at the screen, his jaw tight. Loretta Jensen. 1-bedroom apartment, 10th arrondissement. Works as a server at Café Laurent, cleans office buildings at night. The twins, Lisa and Richard, are 4 months old. Born premature at 33 weeks. She's been raising them alone. Premature. The word hit like a fist. She'd been in a hospital, terrified, delivering his children too early, and where had he been? Signing contracts. Planning this engagement to a woman whose last name he'd forget in a decade? There's more. Marcus's voice dropped. She tried to reach you. 7 phone calls in the first 3 weeks after you ended things. 4 emails. 1 handwritten letter delivered to your office. Lucien's hands curled into fists. I never received anything. I know. Someone intercepted them. Every single one was blocked before it reached you. The trail leads back to our own communications network. Someone inside decided she was a liability. The rage that flooded through Lucien was cold and surgical. Someone in his organization had made that call. Had erased Loretta from his life and left her to drown alone. And he'd been too blind, too arrogant, too convinced of his own righteousness to notice. Find out who, Lucien said, his voice quiet and lethal. Marcus nodded and disappeared. Lucien stood alone on the balcony, hands braced against the railing. Below, the city glittered with 1,000 lies. There you are. Samantha stepped outside, arms crossed, her expression sharp. You've been avoiding me all night. People are noticing. I'm noticing. She moved closer, studying his face. What happened in that car, Lucien? Who was that woman? No one. Don't lie to me. Her eyes narrowed. You've been somewhere else since we left the apartment. If there's something I need to know. His phone vibrated. A message from Marcus lit the screen. Birth records confirmed. Twins born January 3, 2025. Conception, April 2024. DNA match, 99.9%. They're yours. Lucien stared at the words until they blurred. The math was undeniable. The truth unavoidable. Lisa and Richard were his children. And while he'd been standing in ballrooms pretending to build a future with a woman he'd never love, Loretta had been fighting for survival. Alone. Abandoned. Carrying his son and daughter through a war he should have fought beside her. Lucien? Samantha's voice had an edge now, something dangerous creeping beneath the polish. He looked up at her, this stranger he was supposed to marry, this alliance dressed as romance, and felt every lie collapse. Excuse me, he said, and walked back inside, leaving her alone on the balcony. Behind him, Samantha watched with eyes like winter. She'd remember this moment. And she would make him pay for it. Lucien watched her from across the street for 3 days before she noticed him. She emerged from her apartment building each morning at 6, the twins bundled against her chest in that worn carrier, moving with the careful efficiency of someone who'd learned to survive on no sleep and less hope. She walked 4 blocks to a neighbor's apartment, an elderly woman who watched the babies while Loretta worked. Then she disappeared into the metro, heading to her first job. Lucien followed at a distance, invisible in expensive cars with tinted windows, watching a life he should have been part of. Watching a woman he'd destroyed. Marcus had compiled the full report. Lucien read it in his office at 3 in the morning, unable to sleep, unable to stop seeing Loretta's face. Subject discovered pregnancy 6 weeks after relationship termination. Initial attempts at contact, 7 phone calls, all blocked, 4 emails, intercepted, 1 physical letter, never delivered. Subject sought prenatal care at public clinic due to lack of insurance. Lucien's hand trembled as he turned the page. Hospitalization, week 33. Premature labor triggered by stress and malnutrition. Emergency C-section. Twins born January 3, 2025. Combined birth weight, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. NICU stay, 18 days. Total medical debt, €47,000. He stopped reading. Closed his eyes. Saw Loretta alone in a hospital room, cut open, terrified, with no one's hand to hold while his children fought for their first breaths in plastic boxes. While he'd been closing a deal in Monaco. Subject returned to work 11 days post-discharge. Current employment, server at Café Laurent, 6:30 a.m. to 2 p.m., office cleaner at Moreau Financial District, 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. Sleep average, 3.2 hours per night. 3 eviction notices in 4 months. Debt collectors actively pursuing. No family support. No government assistance requested. The report continued for 6 more pages. Every word was a knife. She had never begged. Never asked anyone for help. She had simply survived. On the 4th day, Lucien watched her finish her café shift. She moved between tables with practiced efficiency, smile automatic, exhaustion hidden behind customer service. A businessman at table 6 let his hand linger too long when she delivered his espresso. She stepped back smoothly, professionally, but Lucien saw the tension in her shoulders. He wanted to cross the street. Walk through that door. Break every bone in that man's hand. Instead, he stayed in the car and hated himself. That night, he followed her to the office building she cleaned. Watched her push an industrial vacuum across marble floors at 2 in the morning, headphones in, moving like a ghost through spaces where he'd negotiated €1 million deals. She worked in the building he owned. Cleaned the offices of men who answered to him. And he hadn't known she existed there. At 4:15 a.m., she emerged, swaying slightly with exhaustion. She walked to the metro station. Rode home. Picked up the twins from the neighbor who never seemed to sleep. Disappeared into her apartment. Lucien sat in his car as dawn broke over Marseille, watching her window, and felt something fundamental break inside him. He had told himself he left to protect her. That his world was too dangerous. That loving him would kill her. But the truth was simpler and more devastating. His protection had never arrived. Only his absence. Only the void he'd left behind. She'd been drowning, and he'd been the one who tied the stones to her feet. We found who blocked the communications, Marcus said the next evening, his voice carefully neutral. They stood in Lucien's office, the door locked, the weight of the revelation heavy between them. Who? Samantha's brother. Pierre Helton. He was managing your security protocols during the transition period 18 months ago. He flagged Loretta as a potential vulnerability and had her digitally erased from your life. Samantha knew. She authorized it. Lucien said nothing for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. Lethal. They knew she was trying to reach me. They knew about the pregnancy. We believe so, yes. The pieces assembled like a weapon. Samantha hadn't just agreed to marry a man who didn't love her. She'd engineered the circumstances. removed the competition. Let Loretta suffer alone while positioning herself as the perfect strategic choice. And Lucien's empire, his network, his resources, his own organization, had been the weapon used against the woman he loved and the children he'd never known existed. "Sir?" Marcus asked carefully. "What do you want to do?" Lucien walked to the window. Below, the city sprawled in carefully organized chaos. His city. His empire. Built on control and calculated violence. But now he understood the terrible truth: his empire wasn't protecting his children. It was the greatest threat they'd ever face. "Find Loretta," Lucien said. "Secure her building. Discreet surveillance. I don't care what it costs." "And Samantha?" Lucien's reflection stared back at him from the glass, a stranger wearing his face. "She'll wait. First, I fix what I broke." Even if Loretta would never forgive him. Even if he didn't deserve forgiveness at all. Lucien found her in the hospital parking lot on a Thursday afternoon. She was buckling the twins into a borrowed car seat in the back of a rusted Peugeot that looked one breakdown away from death. Lisa fussed softly. Richard stared up at the sky with dark, solemn eyes that looked exactly like Lucien's. He approached slowly, hands visible, unthreatening. Still, she sensed him. Mothers developed instincts like that. Loretta turned, and for a moment, her face registered pure shock. Then it smoothed into something worse: nothing at all. "Loretta." "No." Her voice was quiet. Absolute. She turned back to the car seat, adjusting straps with hands that didn't shake. "You don't get to say my name. Not anymore. I need to talk to you. You needed to talk to me 18 months ago." She closed the car door gently, carefully, then turned to face him fully. "You needed to answer when I called 7 times. You needed to read the letter I sent. You needed to be there when I woke up alone after surgery, wondering if my babies were going to survive." Her voice never rose. That made it worse. Lucien took a step closer. "I didn't know. I never received." "Of course you didn't." Loretta laughed, bitter and raw. "Men like you never know. You just make decisions and walk away, and everyone else bleeds while you sleep soundly in your fortress. Someone blocked your calls. Intercepted everything. I'm handling it. You're handling it." She shook her head slowly. "Do you hear yourself? You didn't leave me, Lucien. You erased me. And when I tried to tell you that you were going to be a father, your people made sure I disappeared." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Because she was right. His empire, his network, his own organization had been the weapon used against her. "I left to protect you," Lucien said, hating how hollow it sounded now. "No." Loretta's eyes flashed. "You left because it was easier. Because choosing me meant risk, and choosing your empire meant control. Don't rewrite history and call it nobility." Inside the car, Lisa began to cry. Loretta didn't break eye contact with Lucien, but her hand reached back, rocking the car seat through the open window with practiced instinct. The crying stopped. "I can help you now," Lucien said. "Money, security, a better apartment." "I don't want your money. Loretta, you're drowning in debt. You work 2 jobs on 3 hours of sleep. Let me." "Let you what?" Her voice finally rose, controlled fury breaking through. "Swoop in and fix everything? Buy your way into their lives because you suddenly feel guilty? They're not a business deal, Lucien. They're human beings. My children. They're mine too. The words hung in the air like a blade. Loretta stared at him for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was devastatingly calm. You don't earn fatherhood by showing up when it's convenient. You earn it by being there at 3 a.m. when they won't stop screaming. By holding them through every fever. By choosing them when it costs you everything. She opened the driver's door. You chose your empire. I chose survival. We both made our choice. Loretta, please. I've been fighting alone for months. I'm still standing. I don't need you now. She paused, one foot in the car, and looked back at him. Something in her expression softened, just slightly. Not forgiveness. Something sadder. You were right about one thing. Your world is dangerous. And I won't let Lisa and Richard anywhere near it. She slid into the driver's seat. They deserve to know their father, Lucien said, desperate now. They deserve a father who chose them first. Loretta started the engine. You don't get to come back because it's convenient. You left. I finished the story alone. The Peugeot pulled away, coughing exhaust, one taillight flickering. Lucien stood in the parking lot until the car disappeared, his hands shaking, his chest hollow. He'd survived assassination attempts without flinching. Negotiated with men who wore violence like cologne. Built an empire from blood and calculation. None of it had prepared him for this. For the look in Loretta's eyes when she told him he'd lost the right to their lives. He turned to leave, then stopped. 3 cars in the parking lot. Unfamiliar. Dark sedans with tinted windows. One had been parked when he arrived. 2 had appeared during the conversation. His instincts screamed. Lucien pulled out his phone, dialing Marcus as he walked. Run the plates on 3 vehicles. Hospital parking lot, northwest corner. Now. He climbed into his own car, dread coiling in his gut. Someone else was watching Loretta. And if his enemies had found her, his children had just become targets. The call came at 2 in the morning. Lucien was awake, staring at surveillance footage of Loretta's apartment building, watching her window for the light that meant the twins were crying again, when Marcus burst through the office door without knocking. We have a problem. Marcus threw a tablet onto the desk. Security footage played, grainy, distant, but unmistakable. 3 men outside Café Laurent. One showing a photograph to the manager. The manager pointing. The men leaving. Who are they? Lucien asked, though ice was already forming in his chest. Dmitry Volkov's crew. The name hit like a fist. Volkov, the Russian syndicate leader who'd been trying to breach Lucien's Mediterranean operations for 3 years. Ruthless. Patient. Willing to do anything for leverage. When was this? 6 hours ago. Marcus pulled up another image. This was taken an hour later. The photograph showed Loretta, clear as day, walking home with the twins. Someone had circled her face. Written coordinates in the margin. They know, Lucien said quietly. They know you have children. They know the mother is unprotected. And they know you've been watching her. Marcus's voice was grim. Word is spreading through the network. By tomorrow morning, every rival you've ever made will know your weakness has a name and an address. Lucien was already moving, grabbing his phone, his jacket. Get a team to her apartment now. Full security detail. I don't care if she refuses. Sir, there's something else. Marcus pulled up an email chain. Lucien's blood turned to ice as he read. Messages between Pierre Helton and an encrypted account. Photographs of Loretta attached. Details about her schedule, her jobs, her apartment. And a final message, sent 12 hours ago. She's alone. Unguarded. No value to Lucien anymore. Do what you want with the information. Samantha's brother sent this, Lucien said, his voice lethal quiet. We traced the encrypted account. It's connected to Volkov's network. Marcus met his eyes. Someone wanted Volkov to know about Loretta. And we think Samantha authorized it. The pieces assembled like a bomb. Samantha hadn't just erased Loretta from his life 18 months ago. She'd been feeding information to his enemies. Ensuring that if Lucien ever tried to return to Loretta, there would be consequences. Punishment. She'd turned his children into targets out of spite. Where is Samantha now? Lucien asked. At her family's estate. She's been there since the engagement party. She knows you've been distant. She's angry. Lucien's phone buzzed. A text from the security team he'd stationed near Loretta's building. Subject left apartment 20 minutes ago with children. En route to emergency clinic, one twin running fever. We're following. Relief and terror crashed through him simultaneously. At least they were mobile. At least his men were close. Get me there, Lucien said. Now. They were 12 minutes away when the second message came. Lost visual. Subject vehicle turned into parking structure. Team moving to intercept. Then nothing. Lucien dialed. No answer. Dialed again. Straight to voicemail. Drive faster, he told his driver. 10 minutes later, they reached the clinic. The parking structure was empty except for Loretta's rusted Peugeot, driver's door hanging open, car seat empty in the back. No Loretta. No twins. No security team. Just silence. Lucien's phone buzzed. Unknown number. A video file. His hands shook as he opened it. The footage was dark, shot in what looked like a warehouse. Loretta sat in a metal chair, hands zip-tied behind her back, blood at her lip where someone had hit her. Behind her, two cribs, Lisa and Richard crying, tiny faces red with terror, reaching for their mother who couldn't reach back. A voice off camera, Russian accent thick and amused. Lucien Moreau. You cost me 3 years and 20 million euros. Now I'm going to cost you everything. The camera zoomed closer to Loretta's face. She stared directly into the lens, exhausted and terrified but unbroken. Don't come, she said, voice steady despite the blood. It's a trap. Don't. Someone struck her across the face. The camera swung back to the twins, crying harder now. 1 hour, the voice continued. Warehouse District, Pier 17. Come alone, or they die screaming. And Moreau? Don't bother bringing your army. We have someone inside your organization. We'll know. The video ended. Lucien stared at the screen, his world fracturing. Behind him, Marcus was already mobilizing teams, coordinating logistics, planning tactical entry. But Lucien barely heard him. On the screen, frozen on the last frame, Loretta's eyes stared back at him. Not pleading. Not begging. Just aware. Aware that the man who'd left her to protect her had instead painted targets on their children. Aware that his empire, his power, his control, everything he'd built, had become the weapon aimed at their hearts. And aware that if he walked into that warehouse, he'd probably die. Lucien closed his eyes. For the first time in his life, power meant nothing. Get me a car, he said quietly. No backup. No team. Sir, that's suicide. I said get me a car. Marcus stared at him. Then nodded. 1 hour. Pier 17. This time, Lucien wouldn't run. Even if it killed him. 53 minutes. Lucien sat in the back of an unmarked sedan, watching the city blur past, counting down the seconds until he walked into his own execution. Sir, please reconsider. Marcus's voice crackled through the phone. We can position snipers on the adjacent buildings. Entry team on standby. You don't have to go in blind. He said come alone. He has someone inside my network. If I bring backup, they'll know. Then let me come with you. No. Lucien's voice was final. You stay with the team. If I don't walk out of that warehouse, you get Loretta and those children to safety. Whatever it costs. A long silence. Then, understood. Lucien ended the call. Stared at his reflection in the window. His father's face stared back, the same sharp jaw, the same cold eyes that had built an empire on calculated violence. Power is control, his father had told him when he was 16, standing over the body of a man who'd betrayed them. The moment you let emotion dictate your choices, you've already lost. Love is weakness. Family is leverage. Remember that. Lucien had remembered. For 22 years, he'd lived by that philosophy. Never let anyone close enough to matter. Never give enemies a target. Control everything, trust nothing, survive at all costs. It had made him untouchable. It had also made him a coward. He'd left Loretta because loving her terrified him more than any bullet. He'd convinced himself it was protection, but the truth was simpler. His father's voice had been louder than his own heart. Power is control. Love is weakness. But his father had been wrong. Love wasn't weakness. Walking away had been. And if Lucien died tonight trying to fix that, at least he'd die human. 41 minutes. His phone buzzed. A video call. Samantha's face filled the screen, perfectly composed except for the rage burning in her eyes. You're really going to do this, she said. Not a question. An accusation. How long have you known? Lucien asked quietly. About the children? Since the engagement party. You weren't subtle, Lucien. You looked at that woman like she was oxygen. Samantha's smile was razor sharp. I had her investigated. When I found out about the twins, I made sure the right people knew. People who could make your little problem disappear. You fed Loretta to Volkov. I fed your weakness to Volkov. She leaned closer to the camera. Did you really think I'd let some broken single mother ruin everything we built? You were supposed to marry me. Give me power. Instead, you've been obsessing over her like a lovesick teenager. Those are my children. Those are liabilities. Samantha's voice turned vicious. And if you walk into that warehouse tonight, you're a dead man. Volkov won't let you leave. So choose carefully, Lucien. Your empire or your bastards. You can't have both. Lucien stared at her for a long moment. This woman he'd almost married. This stranger who'd turned his children into weapons. You're right, he said quietly. I can't have both. He ended the call. Blocked her number. And felt something inside him finally, definitively break free. 32 minutes. The sedan pulled up to Pier 17. The warehouse loomed ahead, rusted metal, broken windows, darkness pooling like blood around the foundation. 2 guards stood outside, visible and armed. Lucien's driver turned around. "Sir, it's not too late." "Yes, it is." Lucien opened the door. "Tell Marcus what I said. Get them out, whatever happens." He stepped into the night air. The guards watched him approach, weapons raised. One spoke into a radio. The massive warehouse doors began to open, metal shrieking against concrete. Inside, shadows moved. Lucien could see figures positioned throughout the space, at least a dozen armed men. Sniper positions in the rafters. Floodlights waiting to blind him. Every tactical advantage on their side. In the center of the space, barely visible, Loretta, still tied to the chair. The cribs beside her. Lisa and Richard's cries echoing off metal walls. Lucien's hands were empty. No weapon. No armor. No backup. Just a father walking toward his children, knowing he'd probably never walk back out. "Power is control," his father's voice whispered. "No," Lucien thought. "Love is sacrifice." He crossed the threshold. The warehouse doors slammed shut behind him with the finality of a coffin closing. Floodlights exploded to life, blinding. Lucien raised a hand against the glare. Somewhere ahead, someone laughed, low, cruel, satisfied. Lucien Moreau, Dmitry Volkov's voice echoed through the space. "You came alone. How noble. How stupid." Footsteps surrounded him. Guns cocking. Loretta's voice, hoarse and desperate. "Lucien, no." But it was too late. He was already inside. And this time, he wasn't running. Dmitry Volkov stepped into the light. He was 50-something, broad-shouldered, with the kind of scars that told stories most men didn't survive. He held a pistol loosely, casually, like violence was just another Tuesday. "The great Lucien Moreau," Volkov said, circling slowly. "On his knees for a woman and 2 babies. Your father would be ashamed." "My father is dead," Lucien replied, voice steady despite the guns trained on him from every angle. "And his philosophy died with him." Volkov laughed. "Philosophy. Listen to him." He gestured to his men. "Search him." Rough hands patted Lucien down. Found nothing. They stepped back. "Clean," one reported. "Of course he's clean." Volkov moved closer to Loretta. "He came to die. Didn't you, Moreau?" Lucien's eyes found Loretta's across the space. Her lip was split, blood dried on her chin. Exhaustion carved shadows under her eyes. But her gaze was clear. Defiant. She shook her head slightly. "Don't do this." But they both knew it was already done. Behind her, Lisa and Richard screamed in their cribs, tiny voices raw from crying. Lucien's chest constricted. 4 months old. Too young to understand why their mother couldn't hold them. Too young to know their father was the reason they were here. "Let them go," Lucien said. "You want me. You have me. The woman and children are worthless to you." "Worthless?" Volkov laughed. "They're everything. They're your weakness." "And weakness," he pressed the gun barrel against Loretta's temple, "has a price." Loretta didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed locked on Lucien. 3 years you've blocked my operations," Volkov continued. 20 million in losses. 17 of my men dead. And now I find out the untouchable Lucien Moreau has children. Hidden children. Secret children. He smiled. "That information cost me 50,000 euros. Worth every cent. Who sold it to you? Lucien asked, though he already knew. Someone who understands that love makes men stupid. Footsteps echoed from the shadows. Lucien's blood turned to ice. Samantha emerged into the light, immaculate in black, diamonds at her throat like armor. She looked at Lucien with something between triumph and rage. You couldn't just let her go, Samantha said. You couldn't just marry me and build what we were supposed to build. You had to keep looking back at her like she was the one who mattered. She is the one who matters, Lucien said quietly. She's nothing. Samantha's composure cracked. A waitress. A single mother living in squalor. I gave you everything, my family's network, political connections, power, and you threw it away for her. I never loved you, Lucien said. You knew that from the beginning. Love. Samantha spat the word like poison. Love is a fairy tale for children. I offered you an empire. She offered you weakness. She offered me humanity. Samantha's face twisted. Then you can die human. She turned to Volkov. Kill her first. Make him watch. Volkov raised his gun toward Loretta's head. Time fractured. Lucien saw everything with perfect clarity, Loretta's eyes closing, accepting. The twins crying. Samantha's smile. The warehouse shadows. Every choice that had led to this moment. And he made one more. Wait. Lucien's voice cut through the tension. You want leverage? You want to destroy me? Killing them is too fast. Too merciful. Volkov paused. I'm listening. Let them go. Take me instead. Lucien stepped forward, hands raised. You said it yourself, I cost you 3 years and 20 million. One bullet ends that. But keeping me alive? Torturing me? Broadcasting it to every syndicate from here to Moscow? That destroys my reputation. My empire. Everything I built. Lucien, no, Loretta's voice broke. She's right, Samantha said. He's manipulating you. Kill them all, Anne. Shut up. Volkov stared at Lucien, calculating. You trade yourself for them? Yes. Even though she hates you? Even though she'll raise those children to forget you existed? Yes. Volkov smiled slowly. You really do love her. More than my own life. The words hung in the air. Loretta was crying now, silent tears streaming. Samantha looked like she wanted to pull the trigger herself. Volkov lowered his gun slightly. You know what? I believe you. Which makes this so much better. He raised the pistol again. But this time, he aimed it at Lucien. If you love them more than life, Volkov said, let's test that. Everything happened at once. Volkov's finger moved toward the trigger. Lucien lunged forward, putting himself between the gun and Loretta. Samantha screamed something, rage or warning. The twins' cries reached a crescendo. And a single shot exploded through the warehouse. The sound echoed like thunder. Lucien felt the impact, massive, crushing, as his body jerked backward. He saw Loretta's face, mouth open in a scream he couldn't hear. Saw the warehouse ceiling spinning. Saw his own blood spreading across concrete. Then darkness swallowed everything. And all he could think was, this time, I didn't run. The bullet tore through Lucien's chest like judgment. He felt it enter, white-hot, massive, felt his body betray him as his legs collapsed. The warehouse floor rushed up to meet him, concrete cold and unforgiving against his cheek. His lungs seized, trying to pull air through a chest that wouldn't cooperate. Blood spread beneath him, warm and fast, too much blood, pooling around his expensive suit like a final rebuke to every illusion of control he'd ever held. But he'd done it. He'd stepped in front of her. This time, he hadn't run. Chaos erupted. Loretta's scream cut through everything, raw, animal, devastating. She fought against the zip ties, the chair rocking violently as she tried to reach him. Lucien. Somewhere in the distance, gunfire. Marcus hadn't listened. The backup team was breaching the warehouse, glass shattering, doors exploding inward, voices shouting commands. Volkov swore in Russian, already moving toward the exit. Samantha stood frozen, face pale, staring at Lucien's body like she couldn't believe what she'd helped create. Get them out. Marcus's voice, commanding, furious. Medic. Now. Hands cut through Loretta's restraints. She collapsed forward, crawling across concrete to Lucien, her hands finding his face, his chest, the blood that wouldn't stop spreading. No, 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 Lucien, stay with me, her voice broke. You don't get to do this. You don't get to die and make it noble. Lucien's eyes fluttered open. Found hers. He tried to speak but blood filled his mouth. Don't talk, Loretta sobbed, pressing her hands against the wound, trying to hold him together through sheer will. Help is coming. Just hold on. Please. Behind her, the twins were still crying. Someone, one of Marcus's men, was lifting them from the cribs, carrying them towards safety. Lucien's hand found Loretta's. Squeezed weakly. I'm sorry, he wanted to say. I'm sorry for everything. But darkness was already pulling him under. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and desperate hands. Paramedics worked over Lucien's body with controlled urgency, chest compressions, oxygen, pressure on the wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Loretta sat pressed against the wall, covered in his blood, watching them fight for a life she'd told herself she didn't want back. BP dropping. Get another line in. He's crashing. The monitor flatlined. The sound pierced through Loretta like another bullet. No. She lunged forward, but hands held her back. Lucien. They shocked him once. Twice. His body jerked against the gurney. Nothing. Come on, the paramedic muttered, hands on Lucien's chest, pumping. Come on, don't you dare. A beep. Weak. Then another. We got a pulse. Thready, but it's there. The ambulance doors burst open. Hospital lights flooded in. They pulled the gurney out at a run, wheeling Lucien toward trauma doors that swung wide like gates to the afterlife. Loretta stumbled after them, but a nurse caught her arm. Ma'am, you can't go in. That's the father of my children. I understand, but you have to wait here. The trauma doors closed. Lucien disappeared behind them. Loretta stood in the emergency room hallway, shaking, covered in blood that was still warm, and felt her world collapse inward. Lisa and Richard arrived 20 minutes later, carried by Marcus, who looked like he'd aged a decade. They were screaming, confused, terrified. Loretta took them with trembling hands, held them against her chest, and finally let herself break. She sank into a plastic chair and sobbed into their soft hair while they cried with her. He stepped in front of you, Marcus said quietly, sitting beside her. The bullet was aimed at your head. He didn't hesitate. Loretta couldn't speak. Could only hold her children and replay that moment, Lucien's body moving between her and death, his eyes meeting hers one last time. Hours passed. Lisa and Richard finally exhausted themselves into sleep against her chest. Loretta stared at the trauma room doors, waiting. When they finally opened, a surgeon emerged, mask pulled down, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. Loretta stood, heart hammering. "He's alive," the surgeon said. "Barely." The relief was physical, nauseating. The bullet missed his heart by centimeters. Collapsed his right lung, severed an artery. "We've stopped the bleeding, but the next 48 hours are critical. If he survives the night," the surgeon paused. "If he survives, he'll need extensive recovery. Months. Maybe longer." "Can I see him?" "ICU. 10 minutes only." "He's unconscious. He may not hear you." Loretta followed the surgeon through sterile corridors on legs that barely worked. They stopped outside a room filled with machines and monitors. Through the window, she saw Lucien, pale as death, tubes everywhere, chest barely rising. She stepped inside. The door closed softly behind her. For a long moment, she just stood there, watching this man who'd broken her, left her, then died for her. Lisa stirred against her shoulder. Richard's tiny hand curled around her finger. Loretta moved closer to the bed. Placed her hand over Lucien's, careful of the 4 lines. "You stupid, selfish man," she whispered. "You don't get to fix everything by dying." His hand was cold beneath hers. "But you also don't get to leave me alone again," she continued, tears falling. "So you survive this. You hear me? You survive, and then we figure out what the hell comes next." The monitor beeped steadily. Lucien didn't move. Loretta pressed her lips to his forehead, tasting salt and antiseptic and the ghost of the man she'd once loved. "Don't you dare give up," she said. Then she left, carrying their children, and waited for him to decide if he was strong enough to stay. Lucien woke to white light and the steady beep of machines keeping him alive. His chest was fire. His throat was sandpaper. His body felt like it had been disassembled and put back together by someone who'd forgotten a few pieces. But he was breathing. That seemed important. A monitor beeped to his left. And 4 dripped to his right. And in the chair beside his bed, head tilted back against the wall, eyes closed in exhausted sleep, sat Loretta. She looked thinner than he remembered. Worn. Like she'd been carrying the world and finally been allowed to set it down for just a moment. On her lap, Richard slept in a soft blue onesie. Against her shoulder, Lisa stirred, making small sounds like she was dreaming. Lucien's chest tightened, pain that had nothing to do with the bullet. His family. Right here. Real. He tried to speak but managed only a rasp. Loretta's eyes opened immediately. For a moment, she just stared at him, like she couldn't believe he was actually awake. Then she carefully, gently adjusted the twins and leaned forward. "You're awake," she said. No emotion in her voice. Just fact. "How long?" 4 days. She glanced at the monitors. "They said you might not make it through the first night. Then the second. You're stubborn. Learned from you." A ghost of something, not quite a smile, flickered across her face. Then it was gone. "Marcus came by," she said quietly. "Samantha's been arrested. She and her brother are cooperating with authorities in exchange for reduced sentences. Volkov's organization is being dismantled as we speak. You won't have to worry about them." "And you?" Lucien asked. "Do I need to worry about you leaving?" Loretta was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was careful. Measured. I'm not here because I forgive you, Lucien. I'm here because you took a bullet meant for me. Because Lisa and Richard deserve to know the man who did that. She looked down at the sleeping twins. But forgiveness? Trust? That's not something you earn by almost dying. That's something you earn by showing up. Every day. For them. I will, Lucien said. However long it takes. It'll take years, Loretta said. Maybe forever. I'm not the girl you left behind. I'm someone else now. Someone who survived without you. I know. And I won't pretend this is a fairy tale. You don't get to ride in and fix everything. We're not a happy ending. I know, Lucien said again. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for a chance. To be their father. To prove I can be more than the man who walked away. Loretta studied his face for a long moment. Then she stood, carefully, and placed Richard in Lucien's arms. The baby was warm and solid and impossibly small. He stirred, dark eyes opening, Lucien's eyes, and stared up at his father like he was trying to decide if this stranger was trustworthy. This is your son, Loretta said softly. Richard Lucien Jensen. Tears burned Lucien's eyes. Jensen? They have my name. You'll have to earn the right to change that. She placed Lisa in his other arm. The little girl yawned, her tiny hand wrapping around his finger with instinctive trust he knew he didn't deserve yet. This is Lisa Marie, Loretta continued. She's stubborn like you. Richard's quieter. Watchful. Lucien looked down at his children, his son, his daughter, and felt every wall he'd ever built crumble to dust. All the power he'd accumulated, all the control he'd wielded, all the empires he'd conquered meant nothing compared to the weight of these two tiny humans in his arms. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Neither did I, Loretta said. But I learned. You will too. She sat back down, exhaustion settling over her like a blanket. For a moment, they just sat there, two broken people, two perfect children between them, and the long, uncertain road ahead. Marcus told me what you said in the warehouse, Loretta said quietly. That you loved me more than your own life. Lucien met her eyes. I meant it. I know. She looked away. But love isn't enough, Lucien. It never was. What matters is what you do with it. Whether you choose us when it's hard. When it costs you everything. I will, Lucien said. Every day. For the rest of my life. We'll see. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't romance. It wasn't the ending Lucien would have written. But it was honest. It was real. And it was a beginning. 3 months later, Marcus found Lucien on the floor of a modest apartment in the 10th arrondissement. Not his penthouse, not his estate, but the place where Loretta had agreed to let him visit. Lisa was sprawling on Lucien's chest, drooling on his t-shirt. Richard was attempting to eat Lucien's watch. Loretta sat cross-legged nearby, reading, occasionally glancing over with something that might have been amusement. Sir, Marcus said from the doorway. The soul negotiations. Reschedule them, Lucien said, not looking up from his daughter's face. But. Marcus. Reschedule them. Marcus smiled. Yes, sir. He left. Lucien adjusted Richard, who had successfully gotten the watch into his mouth. Lisa grabbed Lucien's nose with surprising strength. They're winning, Lucien said. They're always winning, Loretta replied. And for the first time in 38 years, Lucien didn't mind losing. Because this, messy, exhausting, unscripted, was what survival actually looked like. Not power. Not control. Just presence. Just love, earned one sleepless night at a time. Just family. And that was everything. End.